Welcome to the Hospitality Maverick podcast with me, Michael Tingsare. We at Hospitality Mavericks are here to inspire leaders to create hot-centered and profitable businesses from the inside out, the kind that both employees and customers love and support. Thanks to BizSimply for sponsoring this episode as our show partner. And BizSimply is the all-in-one HR, workforce management, road and operations software designed and built by hospitality experts to make every shift run like clockwork. And we join forces to help the industry to find new ways to become even more innovative in how we lead our people, how we operate, to how we grow our businesses, to how we serve our customers. Together we want to share strategies and tools that can make the industry thrive long term, not just survive.
I feel that people panic when they open restaurants and they sort of kowtow to what reviewers might say or what customers say. And I think you just need to stick to your guns. You're not going to please everyone, and that's fine. But the ones you do please, the people who are fans of St. John are like they're more fans than either of us are. They're just crazy about it, and that's what you want.
This is Jon Spiteri, a maverick and veteran when it comes to hospitality. He was one of the founding partners of St. John and he's been part of many top restaurants in London. You will actually run out of fingers naming the places where he's been the main man at the door. And Jon shared what he's been learning being part of hospitality for the last 4 decades and what he learned when opening a new restaurant with the pressure of the pandemic and the Brexit. He shares how they are approaching this upcoming opening very different than he would have done in the past due to these challenges. You will find that Jon is still very optimistic on his outlook for the industry and he claims that he still have a love affair with it. We talk about there was already pre-pandemic some clear issues around the industry where we needed to change, and Jon especially talks about how we now more than ever need to integrate our people much better into our businesses so they can get involved and get the training they need to be successful. And then they can see the industry as a career choice rather than something in between. Jon shares the power of having a clear vision as well as principles and then go out there and execute on them relentlessly. He also gives some solid advice around avoiding getting impacted by others' opinions like your colleagues, your food critics and reviews. He says, stick to your guns. Before you tune in, please sign up to our weekly newsletter packed with more Maverick insights and strategies and tools. Find the link in the show notes or visit hospitalitymavericks.com. But now, please grab a drink, your notebook, and let's get started learning from 4 decades of hospitality experience. I'm super excited about today's conversation because we're going to dive into more than 4 decades of hospitality experience, not just from London, but all over the world. And for this, I have Jon with me here on the podcast. And as Jon don't need much introduction, but we're going to come back to that in a second. And we're going to talk about, his journey. I think more relevant what he takes from that journey into the situation we're in today, where we are, in principle, what I call creating a new paradigm for hospitality all around the world. And I think that's the interesting thing. This is not like a regional thing. It's not a thing that happens in Europe. Hospitality is changing rapidly across the whole world. And that was the conversation I had with Jon prior to this conversation. But with that said, welcome to the show, Jon. It's great to have you.
Thank you, Michael. It's very lovely to be here.
And Jon, for people that doesn't know who you are and what you've been involved in, can you just give them like a brief summary of your hospitality journey and where you are today and what's coming up ahead for you?
Okay, well, yes, as you say, I've been around a long time. I suppose where did it start? My parents were Tunisian. My mother's still alive, and they came to England in 1957 and opened a guest house in Tunbridge Wells, Kent, and that's where I was born. And so I was brought up in this guest house, and they had a cafe. It's quite, they were Tunisian. They had a cafe called the Norseman Cafe with trolls in the windows, plastic trolls, and they had and they cooked English food up in their sort of 18-room guest house. And my sister and I were brought up there. And then, and actually, it was at that time I thought, I don't really want to be in catering. It's just seemed to be like 24 hours a day job for them. I never really spent much time with them, and I thought this is a terrible lifestyle. But of course, as soon as I started working, I ended up working in restaurants. I left school quite early, and started working in a restaurant in the Fulham Road called Parsons. I was a busboy, and I just loved it. Immediately I was there, I felt like it was the most exciting world to be in. It was when the Rocky Horror Show had just opened up in the King's Road, and all these incredible people were coming into the restaurant, and I thought, oh, I love this. Actually, Alistair Little worked there as well, who's one of my great mentors in the restaurant business. And from then on, it was like non-stop, just restaurants, and bars. I worked in the kitchen, I worked behind the bar, I ended up being a maitre d', I ended up being manager, owner, and have never really not loved it. I mean, it's been difficult, but I've not loved it. And now I'm about to open another restaurant. So yeah, it's been my life.
The interesting thing is that you've actually been part, and you didn't mention it, but you've been quite a part of some quite iconic places in London, and also LA for that sake. But St. John's is probably one of the biggest one, and they're still around today, as I know, even after the pandemic as well, they're still around with a super interesting concept compared to what we're going to be talking about today, because I guess that what you learned at St. John's, keeping it simple and honest in a way, is the way forward. We're going to come back to that in a second. But where do you see the industry? Because it's so interesting. There's been a lot of talk about, surviving the pandemic. We've gone through the pandemic. What I would like us to talk a bit about is about how do you see the industry evolve after this pandemic? That has really have shaken up something, in my view, and maybe you disagree on this, was already coming. There was already a change coming. The pandemic just accelerated that change very quickly.
I think you're right. I think the industry needs to change. I mean, that's a much broader conversation. But how do I see it? I think that I want to be positive about it. I think what we've learned is, and we're about to open a restaurant, and we're finding it's really difficult to get staff. With not only with the pandemic, but of course with Brexit as well. But and we're now, which is one of the themes of this conversation for me, if I was thinking about my whole life in hospitality, is the importance of staff and how we have to incorporate them in our business model, really, because without them we're nothing. And this is what we've found is first of all, the cost of produce is going to be skyrocketing. I think the types of restaurants are going to be seriously looked at, and actually the ones that aren't different enough, aren't interesting enough, are going to go by the wayside. And the staff that we have now are going to have to be looked after, interested, and have a future in this business, because otherwise I think we've for a long time we've hired people that have done it temporarily. They've done it just to put themselves through university, or they're actors and all of that stuff. And now it's we need to find career people who want to make this a career. So there's so many things that are going to have to change, and I hope for the good. Actually, I hope that we're talking about food. I hope we buy good produce and we pay farmers the proper value for their produce, and I hope that we look after staff, that they're not just beholden to tips, but they're paid well and they're looked after. So these are the positive things I want to take out of the pandemic. And there's a lot of negative things, that's for certain.
Yeah, and you talked about the challenge with staff, which is quite imminent right now. And you also mentioned making staff a part of the model. What are you meaning with that? Do you mean that we maybe have seen them as an add-on, like almost like an app on your phone, and not part of the operating system before?
Yes, I think that I've always made it my duty to know what our staff want from the jobs that they have. I mean, some people just want to spend their time there and make money pay for holidays. That's all fine. That's, whatever they want. But others want to do more. And I think we have to offer more training, more incentives, tell them about our future, what we're expecting. So really involve them in the business. I think lots of people want to know how the restaurant business works rather than we sort of more private about that side of things. I think we need to be more transparent. Then they understand that actually our costs are much higher than they imagine. They see the receipts, they see the till receipts, but they don't really see the cost. So I think it's more of an involvement, more of a communication with our staff, and without them we are nothing. There is no doubt about it. And I think now we're having to see that. I mean, I hope that I've always seen that, but I think it's being forced on us a lot more now. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's interesting you're saying there, because I was thinking about, I did an interview a couple of weeks ago with a big personal hero of myself, Singerman's in the US, where they are part of the model. They are, and then when they get them on board, they actually, they know they need some partners for the future to the business. So when they onboard people, they say the ultimate goal is that you potentially become a partner. So therefore, we're gonna not focusing on making you a great employee, but a great business person. And from day one, they're involved in looking at the numbers. They have like these weekly sessions looking at numbers and have this open book management approach. Just as one example to add on what you're saying. And of course, they felt the pandemic, but nobody have left them. And they can still recruit people because they're offering a different value proposition than their competitors in the local area. And people know that because they've done this for 39 years. This is not something they have invented overnight, but and I think that there's some great learnings already for established operators out there that does these things, and where the people function is part of the model, as you say.
Absolutely. I love that idea. I mean, it's the same as the sort of John Lewis model where all the staff are partners. And I think sort of the government have to take that into account as well. I think that's how it needs to be sort of from a sort of tax and an overall business sense. It has to be like that. And because in the end, at the moment, there are ways in which the tax isn't being paid properly and the staff aren't being paid properly, and all this is just sort of it's a strange business model, the restaurant model, and it has to change in that way. And I think that's the way. I think it's going to be forced on us, and I like that idea. I like the idea and I think a lot of people might not be interested in making this a career, but the ones that are, we need to support and look after.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting as well, getting our heads around that. The transient workforce we had before is gone, and now we actually need to focusing on the people that really want them, because they're still there. I talk with them every day, even younger generation that wants to, but they just can't see the road ahead. They just think, what am I getting besides incredible hard work hours? What I'm also getting on the other side? What is the journey for me? Can you map it out for me? They often say. What about what have been some of your learnings? Like, you had already massive experience in the restaurant market and actually preparing opening a restaurant, probably pre-pandemic, and then it's been postponed to after where we're starting opening up now. What has been your learnings about what big questions have you been pondering about?
If you mean through the pandemic, then specifically, then I think we have to. Well, I mean, if I say my big learning in the restaurant world has always been, if you have an idea, stick with your idea. I mean, I think the thing is, sometimes what happens is that you have an idea about a restaurant and then you get swayed because you see what other people are doing and you try to compete with them. I think it was very adamant when we opened St. John. When before we opened the French House, we had this little room above the French House pub, and we were only really going to do it for a few months. We were going to see how it worked. This room was tiny. It had a piano in it, and it had paintings in it, and about 20 covers at that point. We got rid of the piano. We put another table or two in. We got 30 covers out of it. We took the paintings away, and we opened this restaurant, Fergus, Margot, and I. And and it was fantastic. And what we did what we wanted, and that was the point. It wasn't, we didn't try to, we had, I remember on the first menu, we had corn on the cob with, with butter for 80p. And it was just, we did what we thought people would like, and people did like it. And then when Fergus and I went to open St. John, and then Melanie joined Margot at the French House, St. John, we were very clear about what we wanted there. We wanted a very utilitarian space. Fergus was, the designer, the architect in all of that. And he, and we had these rules, we had these sort of 5 rules, which was no service charge, no flowers, no music, no art, no service charge, and no garnish on the plates. And they were the sort of the 5 sort of St. John rules. And we stuck to that. And at the beginning we were very quiet, it has to be said. We had our third partner, who is Trevor, who tried to say that we needed to change things, sort of put some more color in, put some flowers, hang some paintings, play some music, do something. And we stuck to our guns, and I'm really glad we did. Hence, it's still there nearly 30 years later. So I think you have to be very clear about your idea, whatever it is, and stick to it. I feel that people panic when they open restaurants, and they sort of kowtow to what reviewers might say, or what customers say. And I think you just need to stick to your guns. You're not going to please everyone, and that's fine. But the ones you do please, the people who are fans of St. John are like, they're more fans than than either of us are. They're just crazy about it, and that's what you want.
It is so interesting. I was making a bit of notes as you were talking, John, and I think that clarity of that vision you have for a place, you need to keep that. That's what you're saying, and I think that's like many actually forget to spend time on that when they start out, because it sounds like you had a very clear vision, and you had some very clear principles for how to execute that vision, what the rules were, your laws almost, and I guess they still come in place today. They haven't been changed. That's the recipe. And I think too many times, I agree with you, that in whatever we do in life, we just move the goalpost sometimes, or the vision, and we get impacted or influenced by people has opinions, but they're not you, and you already had that client there. It's so interesting. It was like a timeless reflection you had, more than there was a thing in the pandemic. You really said, well, what I learned was to implement technology. So I really like that. Is there anything, now talking about the pandemic, is there anything you're leaving behind, like a mindset around running restaurants, setting them up, yourself as a leader in the industry? Is there anything you're leaving behind, identity, whatever?
What the pandemic has taught me is that we have to be leaner. We have to really be clear about when it comes to Sessions Arts Club. So we were about to open that before the pandemic struck, and we had all our staff, and we had we're in Clerkenwell, and there were thousands and thousands of people working there, going towards Farringdon Tube Station every day. We said to ourselves, if we got 5% of these people, would be really happy. And then the pandemic struck, and overnight everyone left the area. And it's coming back, there's no doubt about it, and it will come back. I know it'll come back. I think offices, they thrive on having people there, but at the moment it's not like that. And so we're opening 18 months later. We're opening only 3 days a week. We're opening with a handful of staff, and we're very conscious of what we serve, and we're wishing on a prayer that it'll work, because we've been lucky with our partners and our investors, who have stuck with us, which a lot of people wouldn't have after this length of time. But we also have to be very practical about what we can and can't do in the next few coming months. I think it's a very interesting time. I think the good restaurants, the restaurants that really are providing interesting food and ambience will make it through, hopefully. And I think a lot will go by the wayside, and maybe that needed to happen. I mean, I'm not, I don't wish ill of any restaurant. I think, I mean, restaurants is, without doubt, they're a labor of love. People aren't doing it to become rich. They're doing it because they have this passion to provide these spaces to serve great food and, hospitality. And so, I wish them all well, but I feel that some won't survive this period.
It was interesting. You mentioned that you were starting off with from the outset with only 3 days open with a smaller group of staff. It's probably also because, as you said in the beginning, there's just no hands available in the moment. But do you think actually you're going to make better decisions because you're actually starting small, and then I guess you're evolving the model and the opening times from there on and trying to build it? Do you think that's going to give you a better start than if you were started, say, like 7 days a week, 3 settings a day, if that was the thing?
Well, yeah, I mean, in all honesty, I don't think we have a choice. For me, I've always loved restaurants that are open from 7 days a week, day and night. Even if you have quieter shifts on a Sunday night, I don't mind. I love the idea that if I feel like going to a restaurant, it's open. And I've always liked the idea of restaurants being open all afternoon because I've worked in the West End a lot. I've worked in cities where they don't stop, and there are times one of my favourite times is to eat lunch at 4 o'clock when there's no one else there. I sit at a noodle bar, Koya, for example, and sit there and eat, and I feel I'm in heaven. And there's very few restaurants nowadays that are open like that. I understand why they're not, but it's annoying. So for me to be closed 4 days a week is very painful, really. But I know why we're doing it. Certainly, the staff problem has been exacerbated by the pandemic, and I'm not the only person suffering like that. I'm a restaurant consultant as well, and lots of people are asking me to find them staff, and I don't know where these people are because they're not here anymore. Something like over 1 million people have left London in the last year, so I think people are coming back, but it's going to take time, and I think they need to be made to feel very welcome here, which might take longer. And so, yeah, it's needs must when it comes to how often we open at the moment.
Another interesting thing I took from what you said is that you actually also that you've been looking at opening, even though people are not back yet, but you're starting up. You could maybe have waited, I guess, another month or two. Is there a reason for opening now here in August? Is there like do you believe you need to get your feet in the water now? And
I think that we've postponed it so much, and we were so close to opening before this started. And as it was, we had all our staff, and we had to let them go. And it was without doubt. I've been around a long time. Around over about 45 years to be exact. And it was the worst day of my catering life, really, to have to let people go who we were just so on the cusp of something we thought was going to be magnificent. And but we had no choice. And now we just have to open, and we have to be brave about it, and we have to test the waters, as you say. When we will open more when we can, and that's what we hope to do. I hope to open 7 days a week. That's what I want. That's what the business needs as well. I mean, in business, you're paying rent, you're doing all this stuff that you pay for every day. I mean, even closing the restaurant for a year, mothballing it, cost us a lot of money. Now, as I say, we've been very lucky with our investors, but there's only so much you can do. People are only so patient. And so, yes, we have to get going now. And we want to. We're excited about it. But it's going to take looking at it on a daily basis.
Yeah, also, you talked a bit about the change in the industry of type of restaurants. There has been very big focusing on pre-pandemic, the casual dining sector that was already in trouble. What do you think the future looks for types of restaurants? Because is it a less restaurant of better quality, and then less frequent visit from people to restaurant as well, because just from affordability kind of thing, people maybe going to be a bit squeezed on the wallet. We haven't really seen the impact of pandemic Brexit yet.
Well, exactly. I think, as you say, that sort of the mid-range restaurant will probably be the first to go. It's odd, when I think of when I was young, going to a restaurant was such a treat, and you dressed up, and it was such a special occasion, and we look forward to it. And then and in other countries it wasn't quite like that, but it was like that in England. And then it changed, and I like the idea that it wasn't such a treat, that actually you could go to a restaurant anytime you liked. And when you're in the restaurant business, that's all you do. I mean, I sort of spent 90% of my eating life in restaurants. It's a surprise to me to go into a supermarket, but I think we're going to go back to that time now where they're going to be expensive. The quality of the food has got to be very special. It's got to be something you can't get in supermarkets, and supermarkets have upped their game. So there's some fantastic food, ready meals that are excellent now. But I think restaurants have to be an occasion. I think staff have to be on point, really have to know what they're doing. I think the quality of the food has to be really good, and I think we talked earlier about what's on the menu, and I think that people now, the quality of meat, the quality of fish has to be exceptional, and it has to be not vast quantities of it, because with the changes in the environment, with the changes in the sort of transportation of food around the world, we have to look at that, and I think we have to go more local. And we can't be eating strawberries in December. We just have to be more conscious of what's being grown, what's being produced closer to home. There's just, whether I like it or not, that's what's going to happen. So we have to be in tune with that. And I think restaurants and food has to be more expensive. And I know we don't like it, but it just has to be. So all of that is going to have an impact on what restaurants are out there, I think. And we can set the standards, and I think people will understand that. I think in general, restaurants have led the way in that way, and I think they'll continue to lead the way. But I think there's going to be a lot of fallout, really.
Yeah, so what you think is that we're not done yet to see the casualties of the pandemic slash Brexit, I guess we can call it.
Absolutely not. And I think a lot. I mean, not to get political, but I think a lot of people knew this was going to happen, and they ignored it. And now we're starting to see it happen. And I think there is an attitude where we, hide our heads, under the sand, and we just let it go. But the truth of the matter is, it's going to be very difficult to get the food that we're used to seeing. And so, restaurants are going to suffer in that way. But so are households. I think we have to change our attitude.
What is there like any you open now over 4 decades, a number of restaurants, you develop the concepts, you open them as well. Is there like any top key learnings that's still available? Because there's a lot of new people coming to the market as well. And also I know listening to the show, is there any like 3 key learnings you want to tell? You talked about in the beginning, you stick to your guns and your vision. Is there any like practical things that's like some key learnings people have to remember as they open restaurants?
Well, I think one of the things is, when we opened St. John, we had a tight budget. I mean, it was a wonderful space to start off with. So it was a lovely empty space. It'd been a smokehouse, but we didn't have a huge amount of money, and so we bought what we could. And what we there were times where I know Fergus and I wanted to put in some lovely lino, Dalsupal lino, on the floor in the bar, and we couldn't really afford it, so we polished the concrete. And actually, that's so St. John now, and that's we paid £15 for chairs, I remember, and actually it's the best thing we did. You can buy chairs now at £150, £200 a chair. It didn't help. What we knew, I think sticking to your budget is very important. It doesn't matter people will eat, and as we do when we go away, we eat in these sort of grotesque looking restaurants sometimes, but the food is so good, we never consider that we're sitting on these really uncomfortable stools, or or the light is so harsh because it's all strip lighting. We just do it because we love it. And I think that it's important to know what you can afford. I think it's important, as I say, sticking to your guns about what you're doing. It doesn't matter what you do. You just can't keep everyone happy. You can't make everyone happy. So if you have a good idea about something, then do it. I mean, my two boys are, well, all my family, my daughter as well, but my two boys are in. They have a restaurant, and they are very clear about what they do, and they have the ability to do more, but they do what they do, and they do it really, really well, and people come for that. And I go to them because I want what they do, which is a chicken burger or a beef burger, and it's spot on. It's fantastic, and I think that's what you need to do. And they've taught me a lot in that way, actually. What else would I do? I think integrity. I think going back to the staff, I think it's really important. One can't be, and one doesn't want to be at one's own restaurant all the time. So you have to really trust in the people that you leave to look after it, and to make them part of that journey. And so it's a family. It really is a family. I know that sounds trite, but it is a family. It's a restaurant. And I know that for me, one of the things I'd say is, however good the food is, I mean, we have the attitude about we go out to restaurants to eat, and however good the food is, if the staff are rude or lazy, or they're just not there, your meal is ruined. And however good the food is, it makes no difference. Whereas if the cooking's a bit off tonight, but the staff member has just been so hospitable, really understanding what that table wants, then that's what you remember. You remember the experience rather than the food. And that's an important thing for owners to remember, is that if your staff are happy, then they're looking after your customers in a happy way. And so, yeah, I'd say those sorts of things.
Oh, no, the three really good ones, John, because what I wrote down was like, know your numbers and stick to the budget, and do one thing very well, and make people part of the model, as you already said. So I think that's three great advice. And I think often those three advice are forgotten when you start opening a restaurant. It becomes very technical about finding the property and so on, which is all important parts of it. There's nothing can stand alone. It's an ecosystem of things. But I think like if you remember those three things, I agree, you'll get. And then sometimes, as you say, just find creative solutions. I think and don't think about if you build your first one, don't think about number 10, because it's not relevant. It's about that number one. And maybe it's not meant to be 10, because you don't know at that point if it actually can become 10 for many reasons.
Absolutely. I mean, it's funny. I think if you were asking me these questions 20 years ago, I'd say you open one and then you open 20 and then you sell. Okay, that's what you do. And you're not emotional about it. And now I say you open one, you love it, and and if you are to open another one, the second one you open is completely different to the first one. And the successful people do that. They, as you said, and you reminded me of like Danny Meyer, in New York, he's one of my heroes, and someone I know. Actually, I've worked with him on some charity events on feeding hungry people in America. And his thing is that people that work for him become partners. They take over the restaurants that they're working in, and I love that idea. And so you have. He at one point, I mean, now he has Shake Shack, but before that he had like 12 restaurants in New York. They were all worked by people who had come through his sort of working academy, if you like, and they loved him. They love him, and he made them part of it. And of course, that's the best way. So he steps away. He creates these environments that then people take on, and they were all fabulous restaurants and different types. That's the sort of thing I'd like to do, if I've got any time left. That is.
Well, there's always time. I think the Colonel, the one that created KFC, was 64 or 63 when he created KFC. So there's always time.
I like to think of myself as the Colonel.
Yeah. So if we just take it back to today and say, okay, well, the next 12 to 18 months, John, in your perspective, if you have a crystal ball, what's going to happen in our industry?
Well, I think we're reopening now. Right now we haven't even opened up properly. My ex-wife does events, and all that hasn't come back yet, and that's going to be interesting. I mean, groups of people. It's quite odd watching the football where you see these thousands of people together. It's very strange because I haven't been in crowds for a long time, and I love going to football. So, we're going to have to live with the pandemic. There's no doubt that there's going to be more of this. There's going to be a lot more people staying at home. So we're going to have to adapt to living with this illness. And there may be more on the way. I mean, I'd be surprised if this is the only one we get. And restaurants are going to have to adapt. I was reading, no, actually, I was listening to something earlier on the radio where they were saying that property people are rushing around trying to find drive-through restaurants. They're trying to find spaces to open takeaways and drive-throughs because that's the new thing. And I mean, as much as I get takeaway food, I know that that's not how I want to eat, really. I'd rather cook or go to a restaurant. But I understand that, the lives that we lead now, that's certainly going to have to be part of it. So, yeah, we're going to have to adapt. Restaurants are going to have to adapt to people's needs. We're going to have to adapt the hours that people want. Lots of changes, but we are a flexible industry. I think that's one thing about us. We're really, we've got our heads to the ground. We know what's going on, and I think we've been hit quite badly. Other industries I'm sure, have been hit worse, but we've been hit pretty badly throughout this. And we've had to adapt, and a lot of people have. So we're just going to have to keep doing that. We're like sharks. We just can't sleep. We keep moving on.
That's interesting. So you actually think that we are moving forward, but we still have a lot of corners to turn. There's not like you can't put down a plan today and say that's where we are in 18 months because there's going to be thrown a couple of things into the mix you hadn't seen coming.
No, well, I mean, we're hoping with Sessions Arts Club that we open slowly. Our staff get used to working again, because that's the other thing. A lot of people haven't been working. They're finding these hours like very hard. They're normally in bed by 10. They're having to work till 12 or 1. So it's difficult. So we're going to grow again. We start, blooming again slowly, and then hopefully the people will come back. The rules will lessen, and we'll just get used to this new life. And but it's going to take time. I think things aren't going to be back to normal within the next year, I don't think. And hopefully we can keep going until then, until we can make this a profitable business.
That's super interesting. Your take on this. I wanted to touch on something in the last part of our conversation about a bit more about you, like who has been, it's always interesting to hear how you make yourself and who makes you. So who has been most influenced to you over the years, the three people you can say that has the most influence on who you have become and what you've done?
It's interesting. I really like this question. Of all the questions, I like this question the most, because I think we are only people. We're made up of people that we've met in our lives, and that's true of all my personal life. It's true of my parental life. Everything is so. And I wanted to be sort of specific about this as an answer, but I'm not going to be, Michael. I'm afraid, because there's too many people in my life. I'm very old. You have to ask a younger person this. So I'd say, I mean, one of the first people. Right? Okay. Fergus has got to be up there, because Fergus Henderson, I've known him. I knew him when he was 16 years old. We were friends, and we talked about opening restaurants. This was before he met Margot, actually. We talked about opening restaurants, and he had been he'd eaten out in lots of restaurants, and he had an attitude towards food. He wasn't a chef; he was an architect. But his talking around food. His parents had taken him to good restaurants, and I remember, he took me to Sweetings in the city, and we talked about how it worked in that restaurant. And the food is good, it's not great, but the whole style of that restaurant is where the French house dining room came from. And I just loved our conversations. And he's, as as has as is well known, he is one of the food greats in the world. He really is. But it's basically from his heart, and that's what I love about him. I mentioned Danny Meyer, and I love what Danny Meyer's done, because his book Setting the Table is all about hospitality, and for me, this business is about hospitality. We can eat anywhere. We can go to fast food chains and eat for £3, or we can get a chicken for £2. We can have a sandwich. We can eat anywhere. But when we're in a restaurant, we're expecting an experience, and Danny absolutely knows that about experience. He knows it in terms of the hospitality he gives to people, but he also knows it in terms of the way he treats his staff, and in a bigger scale, how he treats the environment in terms of helping people eat who are starving. And we think of America as a very rich country, but there are a lot of very hungry people there, and he helps that. And he puts his money where his mouth is. And he's also one of the nicest Americans I've ever met. And I love him. So I just think there's something, and that was someone I had to think about him, but certainly someone who's a big influence. But then the third person is an amalgamation of many, many, many people, okay? Because I've worked with some real greats. Richard Corrigan, for his sort of strength of character. I worked with Roly Lee. I worked with Jeremy Lee. I've worked with Margot and Angela Hartnett. I love her Yorkshire Italian food. I mean, there's so many people. Mary Sue Milliken I worked with in LA. Just fantastic people who've all, Alistair Little, people who've given me a little all the time. I've always picked up stuff from them, and that's how Eleanor at L'Etoile. Faye Mashler is a very good friend, someone who has taught me lots about food, and that's what I've had to learn. I've learned from, I feel, the greats in this business who are still around. So I'm afraid that's a bit of a cheeky answer, the last one, but it's just everyone. I learned from conversing with you, Michael, earlier. I have to have an open mind. I really do. I have to listen, because it's everywhere. And actually, one of the three people I was going to say, and I think this is sort of, well, of course it's nepotism, but my children have taught me a lot. They're all in catering. My daughter is a manager at Koya. So she's, teaches me about all that goes on there. And my two boys have opened their place, and they work so hard. And we talk about catering and restaurants are in our life all the time. And my wife's at the Rochelle canteen, so the whole our family, ex-wife, excuse me, is we've always talked about it. It's always been part of our nature, as it was when I was a child with my parents. So in a way, I learn from everyone.
That's I think it's a super interesting answer, because of course you grow with the people you meet, and you are only as valuable as the people you're together with. It's first who and then what, in principle, always, and that rubs up on you in a way. I know it for myself, like leaving a country, that transition, I probably learned more than I did before I left that country, just because, and that moving to the US as well, that just making that decision, actually starting from scratch, it's such a valuable lesson in life that you can't even get a certificate on that. So yeah, I think that was really interesting answer. We never had that answer before, so I think that was really interesting. What I just want to throw an extra question in there. So if you were, because I know you mentioned Danny Meyer Setting the Table, is that also the book you would give people 9 out of 10 times if you're giving a present away to a hospitality person?
Absolutely. I without doubt, I would give it to people who are working in restaurants. I give it to, like, the maitre d' and the waiters, and I think it's quite telling, the people who would read it and get something from it. They're very small incidences of where you can step over, you can do something above and beyond, and that's the things that people remember. There's a great story in his book about returning, I think it's a wallet or a pair of glasses, to the person who's left it behind in the restaurant and returning it to their hotel. And those are the stories that people remember. I remember working with Eddie Hart at Quo Vadis, and he was saying that if if a meal of, let's say, a table of four, and a meal doesn't arrive on time, the other three people are eating, then you comp the whole meal for all four of them. And those are the stories that people come away with and say. And we have to remember that as much as we need profit to make these things work, we need generosity. Restaurants are about generosity. Food is about generosity, and so we have to be, we have to step over the mark when it comes to that. And I think, and that's what he's taught me. And then that's the book that I would, without doubt. I mean, there's some great books out there, but that's the one that has stood the test of time, I'd say.
Great, great, very interesting. Generosity. That's a very interesting mix. Again, talking about the role of restaurants in the future. What about you yourself, John? How do you make yourself keep going? You know, you mentioned that we're like sharks. We would just keep on. We never sleep. How do you keep yourself in the impact zone, like 80% of the time? Because you there is something called balance, no matter what. But how do you keep that balance and make sure that you show up the best you can be every day?
Well, it's funny, if I was on my own and I was thinking, what am I doing in this restaurant business? I think, well, I would say to myself, why am I doing this? And then I have a conversation like this, or many conversations I have with people. My children have friends and they want to talk about restaurants, and I end up talking to them. And I just get re-infused again. There's something about it. It's a bit like the mafia. You try to get away, but they just drag you back. And there's something about restaurants that I still get a real thrill when I'm in a restaurant. If I'm working, let's say I'm working on the front of house, and I'm at the maitre d' desk, and I see a busy restaurant of people having great conversation and drinking and eating. I get a thrill. Every day is very different. So, you know, I'm not sure I get into the impact zone when I'm on my own, but when I'm there, I feel it, and I have always felt it. There's something about it. Uh, People that aren't in this business don't really understand it because they feel like you're working weekends, you're working out late hours, but we are working when everyone else is enjoying themselves, and there's something really thrilling about that. So I've always enjoyed it. I can't believe I'm the age I am, but still really get a thrill out of working in restaurants. It's quite odd. Though I'd prefer to be a consultant right now, I have to say, than someone who has to do long shifts.
Well, I like that idea. You thrive by the experience and being together with other people, and that's a bit like what really makes you going and actually take you up to your best game. Coming from that, one of my last questions to you is that what advice would you give leaders out there? You have 4 decades of experience. We're probably in the middle of a pandemic. You said we're probably not done yet. What would be your top advice to leaders out there in the industry?
Right. Well, I mean, if it was about owners, I'd have to say that really think about why you want to open a restaurant, because I think there is some vanity projects involved in opening a restaurant, and I feel that that is a mistake. Restaurants cost a lot of money to open, and they take a long time to make money, and I feel that that people who invest in restaurants have to know that this isn't a money making business, really. If you want to make money, you're more likely to bet on a lame horse than you are in a restaurant business. So I'd say be wary of thinking of it as a money making thing. I would say you know I think the people that I've worked with, they understand the commitment it takes, and there are certain types of people that just put on a happy face and they get on with it every day, and those are the people you want to work with. But I think that very soon, very quickly, you find that people aren't suited to this business, and I understand it. It's not for everyone. So my experience of having hired lots and lots of people, um, you very quickly know if they're suited to this business. And I, actually, I've seen people change where they are. They start on the floor and they end up in the kitchen, or vice versa, and they're much happier. So it's to find the level of what they want from the business. And I say, be very thoughtful about what you want to do in the restaurant business. Really have a clear idea. When we've opened the Sessions Arts Club, my partner, who was introduced to me from my Mary Sue, he's an artist, but he was very clear about what he wanted to do, and that's what we're trying to do here. And I think make sure your ideas are solid and not to waver, because that's the problem. I feel a lot of times that's what happens. It opens in one way. I mean, it's interesting. When we opened St. John, we didn't know who was going to come there. We thought there were going to be a lot of our friends who had been at the French House dining room, and we thought it was going to be a much more arty crowd. I mean, it was an arty crowd, but it was also a businessman crowd. I mean, they went for the clarets and the meat, and that's the thought. Now, those weren't the customers that we felt that we were going to get. But we got them, and we love them because they were there all the time. But it's, you can have a vision about what you want, but you're not necessarily going to get what you want, and you have to be able to cater for what you get. So that's an important point, I think.
Yeah, so put the customer in the center of things as they evolve, and actually listening to what they want and more than what you want, because that's not relevant if you want to have long-term relationship with them.
To an extent, that is. I mean, I'm not very keen on the customer is always right. In my opinion, often they're not. But I do feel that you have to understand what they want and be clear about what you're prepared to do. And that's not about not being hospitable. It's about being clear about your vision. And people get it. People get it. They like it. They like your clarity.
Yeah, I think also that's why they buy into it. Like when like Danny Meyer, as you mentioned, very clear vision about what he wants to do, and that's what people buys into. And then it's just improving the execution of that vision all the time, 1% better every day. I think he talks about a lot as well, Danny Meyer, which I'm also a very big fan of. Where can people find out more, John, if they want? Because we couldn't cover 4 decades of knowledge and insights here. Where's the more information? Where can they find you on social and so on?
Well, I'm on Instagram and Twitter, and I'm always. I mean, if people want to find me, I would love to talk to people about. This is my favorite subject. There is no doubt about it, and I would anyone that wants to. DM me. I would be very willing to meet up for a soft drink and a chat, because I take this seriously, and I love it. It's my world. So without a doubt, definitely.
Great, John. We'll put everything in the show notes as well, and so people can find it out there.
Please, yeah, please. I would love to hear from them.
Yeah, John, it's been absolutely incredible having this conversation with you, somebody with such a long career and approach to hospitality, and putting, the hospitality in the center of what we do, the human into the center of what we do, and all your great advice. I remember top of my head, know your numbers and the budget, do one thing well, clarity and vision there, and then make sure that your people are part of the journey. I send you and the team at a session and all your partners power and energy for the times ahead. I'm sure you're going to do absolutely great, and I'm looking forward to catch up soon.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. It's been a real joy talking to you.
Thank you so much, John, for your insights and story and great advice. I would recommend you now to sit down with pen and paper and ask yourself, how can I keep finding the love for the industry and my business? If you want to learn more about how to be a great indie operator, tune in to episode number 13 and 14, Staying True to Mushimo with Carl Jones, who is the owner of Mushimo. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please share, rate, review, or subscribe to one of our channels. A big thank you to BizSimply for supporting us, bringing great insights, strategies, and tools to help the industry thrive, not just survive. Check them out at bizsimply.com. or on their social at BizSimply or BizSimplyHQ. You can also email them directly on advice@bizsimply.com. A big thank you to Fina Charlton, who is the show producer and editor from the podcast collective. Without you, all this wouldn't happen. Tune in next time for another interview, and in the meantime, find out more about us and subscribe to the newsletter and download free leadership tool at hospitalitymavericks.com. And don't worry, if you didn't get all of this, there will be links in the show notes. Thank you, and be Maverick!